And you are listening to Pro Advocate Radio with your host James O'Brien and Deb Beecham, owner and operator and founder of My Advocate Center.
Yeah, operating being the key word.
Yes.
Now, yes, we're here talking about all kinds of operators and the people who help the process work as it should, like this wonderful private investigator who's with us in the studio now. So thank you, George, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Now, George, I'm assuming one of the big things that you spend a lot of time dealing with in these cases is false allegations.
That's true.
And the ability, those can be devastating when you receive them. One, you know they're false, but now everybody's assuming that it must be true or it wouldn't have been said, which is amazing to me that the court would accept so many things on face value when there are so many false allegations made.
Well, you know, that's very true, James. What happens is that whenever you have a divorce action that's filed, this is what I've witnessed in my years, is that they're going to have a list of, I've seen them as long as 20 items that you're alleged to have committed. And when you look through all that, the client will tell me, this is absolutely nonsense. Well, what happens, what we see a lot of times, is those 20 items will now get whittled down to 15, then to 12, then to 10. And finally, we get down to the real items of concern. They might be just 3 or 4. But at the very beginning of the process, all these allegations are made, and you have to defend yourself. Mm-hmm. And now that, of course, the attorney steps in to advise them as to, well, this isn't true, this isn't true. However, it can get to the point where you're going to have to prove that it's not true.
Right. And
so when you get to the point that you have to prove it's not true, then we come in and we help you. The dangerous part about this whole process, when it's at that phase of the divorce action, is that it can have a very bad positioning in a person's mental state, because all these allegations have been made. They're angry, they're upset. How dare you? How dare she? He? Whatever the situation is, and now it becomes a very aggressive conflict, and because of the allegations that are made.
Right. We've actually seen a handful of fathers in the metro Atlanta area over recent years take their lives following cases involving allegations of abuse. And then on the flip side, we have cases where a parent who's really trying to protect their child is the one being accused of something that, if they were allowed to put evidence on the record, they could exonerate themselves, but they're not being given that opportunity. And again, that's another scenario where having someone like you involved, would change that dynamic. So we have the whole spectrum right now. We have fathers who've been in jail, who, from everything you can see on and off the record, that they don't belong in jail. They didn't do what they're being accused of doing, and law enforcement's kind of blind to some of this. And the guardian ad litem reports are being used or misused to keep that person condemned, and then the parent who actually has something to hide and is causing harm is the one being protected.
And that's correct. Yeah. What the guardian ad litem is really a method for the courts to have independent ears and eyes to tell them what's in the best interest of the child or what's going on in that home environment, as I know it. The problem with that is very unique. Sometimes the guardian ad litem is not given a lot of time to interview one of the parties, or they don't take a lot of time to interview one of the parties, and the decision is made based on that. That's the part that I find uncomfortable.
Yeah, sometimes it's just, like you said, an innocent lack of time, too large of a caseload. They're not given the opportunity to have all of the information. And then sometimes there's negligence, whether you call it laziness or worse.
Absolutely, and you see that in every field. You see people that just don't really want to do their job well because they just don't care. In that position, though, you would think that the person that's a guardian ad litem would want to do the right thing. But they do have heavy caseloads. They do have to make decisions quickly. And the dangerous part, I think, is that decisions are made too fast sometimes. It's the wrong decision. Through our investigative effort, we can tell that our client is absolutely the best person in the world, but the guardian ad litem sees it from another perspective. And our client will tell us, George, I only met her for 30 minutes.
Right.
And so we're just, we just have to help them through our evidence, our process. And so when the guardian presents their information to the courts, we can counter that with good, strong evidence to show.
Yeah, that's great. I have a couple of cases I think we need to see if we can get you involved in. And, these aren't my cases. I'm just observing and reporting on what's happening. But we've got a guardian making recommendations to the court where there's clear child abuse, where there's, there's a case in Cobb where the guardian ad litem has not even met the children, hasn't apparently done much of an investigation, but yet the police have indicted the father for secretly videotaping adults and children in the restroom. And it's been all over the news, but the guardian ad litem has just, said, you know what, yeah, we'll let the father have the children.
Well, boys will be boys.
Unsupervised. And yeah, it's somebody refers to that as being home cooked. But that's the kind of failure of investigation that we're seeing in a lot of these cases. So it's a fresh perspective, and I think what we're talking about now is going to give a lot of people hope that maybe there is a way to safely navigate this process.
There is, and the most important part about anything that has to do with the legal system is education. You have to have an advocacy group to go to that can help you be aware of what your rights are, be aware of what you can do. Understand that there are agencies like ours that can help. They're all over the state, and they're all qualified, or else they wouldn't be carrying a license. The thing is that when it comes to the guardian ad litem and misinformation, the human error element always is a factor. The problem with that, though, is that the guardian ad litem has so much authority in the court system.
That is a problem.
And that we kind of are a little bit concerned about that. You have some awesome guardian ad litems once again, and you have some that you're mentioning that aren't even going in there and taking the effort to do their job.
Yeah.
We see that on a higher level in the government, but this concerns children. And when it comes to the evidence that we collect, we hope that our evidence is strong enough to counter the guardian's ad litem information if it's incorrect.
Oh my gosh, that's a shame that you have to counter. That gives me a headache just thinking about it. We have to counter what the guardian's doing when the guardian's charged with.
Well, and you know what? Sometimes we see things through different eyes.
Right.
When we do an investigation, we're out there a little bit longer than a person that comes in and visits just for half an hour or an hour, depending on the dynamics of what they're tasked to do. When we come in, we might work a case for a week, months. It all depends on the direction the investigation is going. And we're able to collect more evidence to show that there is a big difference here. We have had clients that had a protective order because of false allegations from a spouse. They could not communicate with the children. He was to be arrested because allegations were made that he had called the children in the middle of the night. He brought in the phones and we analyzed them and showed that the phone calls were actually coming from the residents. And so he was actually getting set up. So the problem is that the legal system and the guardian ad litem in that particular case, what they did was they were immediately ready to say this guy's going to jail for violating that order. When the guy was sitting at my desk in tears going like, I didn't do this, George. And we're able to prove that he didn't, so that it went away. The problem, though, that existed after that was that now you had people that were upset, not only at us, but at him, because we just showed that they weren't doing their job correctly.
Right.
Right.
That's, I guess, one of the considerations where you guys kind of have to navigate that fine line of presenting the facts without alienating the decision makers.
Oh, absolutely, James. And I'm not, by any stretch of the imagination, beating up the legal system. It's an awesome, incredible system that we have today. There's always room for improvement in anything,
right,
no matter what it is. However, though, that when you run into positions where certain people have so much authority and the checks and balances don't seem to be there, then I would say that that's a disconnect in the legal system for us. Now, as private investigators, we're hired by someone to help them. And if we can't help them, there's nothing we can do. However, when someone that is in a position talking to the families and taking a look at the environment, they have a luxury we don't. They're inside the home talking to the kids, talking to the family. We're doing everything from outside. Mm-hmm. We're catching people doing foolish things out in the open environment. So that kind of, to me, is a little bit of an interesting concept because they can actually see what's going on inside, and to come up with a completely different conclusion than what we have is what frightens us a lot.
Right.
We're like, what did they see that we're not seeing? So that's the concern.
Right. Well, talking about how you get your job done without getting too specific, sure. I'm sure Facebook and social media is a huge tool you guys use. But what are some of the other things that y'all employ to kind of unravel the picture?
Well, it really depends on the case, James. In civil actions, there's things that we use as tracking devices. We use Facebook, as you said. That is awesome. We love Facebook. It's, if you're going to do bad things, folks, get off Facebook.
Right.
And but we love the social media. We do a lot of forensics analysis of cell phones looking for deleted messages, but it has to meet the legal guidelines for us to do so. There's a lot of different things that we're capable of doing, but the one important denominator in the whole thing is the legality of how we do it, and if we can do it. The tools of surveillance are just as old as anything, and because that's what we've been doing as investigators forever.